Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Mian, and I welcome you to another session of iced coffee here with us. Our guest for today is Dr. Asad Mian, professor and chairman of Department of Emergency Medicine, and also the director for CCIT. So good to have you here.
Thank you, Marine. Pleasure to be here. I didn't have an option not to be here, but I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Not too bad myself. Okay. So, we've spoken about so many topics. We started talking about a bit of spiritualism and Taoism, being water-like. So for those people who are joining us for the first time for this session, I would like you to tell them why feel the need for this series, why even feel the need to start a series called Iced Coffee. And pausing you there for a second, Iced here stands for Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship. So why feel the need?
Why not would be my response. At 4 p.m., it's time to have coffee, first of all, right? So there should be a coffee break or a coffee session. Caffeine is really important for several of us.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know about the younger population. I don't know about the Gen Zers. They might not be into caffeine and coffee drinking and chai drinking, but ek to wo coffee ki break or caffeine ki break is important. Why iced? Well, one, this is meant to be relevant to the work we do in CCIT, which is promoting or showcasing creativity, innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And so hence the acronym or abbreviation ICE. How is it different from the other things we're doing, right? For example, we've been running the MedJack webinar series for a year and a half. How is this different? The MedJack webinar series covers content. It's work that we've done, we've projects we've done and we've written about. And they tend to be more mainstream innovation related. Then I felt that for some topics that we were able to approach somewhat laterally and not directly link them to innovation, but was through experiential learning perhaps, and things that were not overtly clear from the get-go. And that's when we started thinking about having a different series, and we've called it Iced Coffee. And the tagline over there is conversations or chats around topics that are lesser explored. The challenge here to us is always to link it back to innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And it's really interesting to me that a lot of things that you might not upfront think are related or relevant to innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. But when you scratch the surface or you probe further and you dig deep, you drill deep, you do make those connections. And that's when your mind is really working. You're able to connect, and that's creativity. When you connect not very overtly linked things, that is creativity right there. Your mind is working in a very creative way as well. So so some of the topics you mentioned earlier, we talked about my trip across Turkey and how that was linked to innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And that was the first session. Then we talked about Taoism and being like water. And this is an extension of Taoism, another concept, which is being childlike. And we have other topics in the series. We've discussed some of those other topics which you want to
share with our audience.
Introduce the audience to, or share with the audience. And we want other people who are really interested in different things. They're intrigued by or interested in different things and might overtly not be linked to ICE, but they figured it out. How those topics are linked to ICE. Please reach out to us and we'd be very happy to onboard you as potential speakers or panelists in the Iced Coffee series. I don't know if that was kind of like a long-winded answer.
No, that was a great answer for sure. Okay, so welcome everyone, for people who are joining us here and for folks that are present with us online. This is meant to be an interactive session. So please feel free to pause us, and just raise your hand or just ask a question or your comments. And for folks online, please feel free to use the chat space provided to put in your thoughts, comments, questions, and suggestions. So you already mentioned the topic for today, which is very close to a lot of us, being childlike. What made you decide to choose this as the topic for today's session?
Well,
what made you,
For one reason, it didn't require a lot of preparation. Time नहीं था, तो मैंने कहा चलो अच्छा ये कर देते हैं और फिर होना था ये. This was meant to happen like maybe 2-3 weeks back, but then something else happened. No, actually 2 weeks back perhaps. Anyway, so we had to reschedule it. Yeah, I mean, so I think I completely agree with you that this topic overtly might not be linkable or linked to ICE. And I'm going to keep using the acronym ICE, and I'm not going to say out the whole long phrase. But it's been so important to the work we've been doing.
Right.
And I felt, why not talk about it? And also because I had put together some of that thought process and written an article that got published in the Express Tribune a few months back. And our book, MedJack, also has delved into being childlike and how that is relevant to creativity, of course, which is a very simple connection and linkage, right? Most people might just stop there. कि हाँ, बच्चे creative होते हैं, हम लोग भी creative हो सकते हैं, right? तो वो उधर stop हो जाता है. But हम लोग इस session के through and through our conversations, we want to make that linkage to innovation as well. Being childlike, how is that linkable to innovation? How is that linkable to startups as well, and business potential?
Absolutely.
So that's where this interest was.
We'll delve into the deeper layers that you've just mentioned. So, like you just pointed, simple connection that being childlike equals being creative. Do you think it's because, the state of simplicity that they exist in? It's the children are simple.
Yeah,
and they don't complicate things.
And that's a great point, right? So that would directly then segue into, or I would actually then link it to Taoism, because being childlike is not something that I've just come up with. I mean, and the article, if people can, if you just Google it, it's in the Express Tribune Tea magazine a few months back. And the title of the article was "The Power of the Uncarved Block and the Need to be Childlike Now More Than Ever." And so when you mentioned the simple state, actually that is the concept of the uncarved block. And it is from the Tao Te Ching or Taoism. And what is the uncarved block? It's being simple. It's being unspecialized. It's having limitless potential, because you could mold an uncarved block in any of limitless ways. And so that simplicity,
right,
the undifferentiated state, and in I'll make an analogy to cell biology, for example, because several people are from the healthcare background, health background. The undifferentiated or stem cell, for example. That is simple, right?
Yes.
But it has limitless possibilities, depending on the circumstances that that stem cell is exposed to, and can go into different lineages, different pathways.
I think that's a beautiful example. I didn't think
and
of
it's
it
simple,
that way.
right?
Yes.
Stem cells and undifferentiated cells are simple from that perspective. Of course, I don't want to trivialize cell biology as well, but it's a good analogy for me.
It's a great analogy. So, here at one point you're talking about simplicity and how it's uncarved, yet there are limitless possibilities to which way you can mold your thought process, or a cell can be molded, or a child can be molded. So limitless possibilities. I think that's great. And also another thing, so, and this is something that we collectively feel, that there is no fear of perfection.
Yeah.
So along with simplicity, they're not biased. There is no, judgmental potential to be judgmental there. It's no fear of perfection. So
yes. So perfectionism, I think it's a never-ending process, right? So how do you know that your work is perfect?
Exactly.
You try to get close to it perhaps, but then children, the way their mind works, and that's how, I mean, I'm a pediatrician by my training, so I tend to watch kids, and I'm a pediatric emergency doctor, but I observe children in the emergency department or in the clinical space, or just outside on the streets, or at home. Kids don't get into perfection. It's society, it's culture, it's parents, it's teachers, it's schooling that drives perfection into them. And I don't agree with that, because I think you're taking away from the creative aspect of the child's
Right.
mind and the child's potential. Because if you link this to innovation,
Hmm.
then iterative processes, right? Making mistakes,
Hmm.
not perfection, but
Hmm.
you implement, you create, and you just keep creating and you get better at it, right?
Hmm.
So children tend to make these illustrations or drawings or colorings, and it's the adult who'll say, oh, ye kya bana hai, right? Oh, iska color sahi nahi hai, ya isko kis tarah se banaya hai,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
they'll be the ones who'll be criticizing
Hmm.
the child's creativity
Hmm.
and not realizing that you're actually inhibiting that creativity.
Absolutely.
And that's what they internalize, that's what they learn, and the child becomes the adult of tomorrow, right? So
Yeah. So you're indoctrinating
yeah,
the
yeah, so
child from
indoctrination, right? So
early on.
yeah.
And
So
yeah.
that's what I think staying away from perfection will let you keep being creative as well.
Hmm.
But then with the understanding that you keep improving
Hmm.
and it's incremental.
Hmm. And you keep on learning it. And I feel
Yeah.
children seem to do it so effortlessly.
Right.
They
Yeah,
seem to
yeah.
come up with games or,
Yeah.
illustrations or whatever so effortlessly, and you tell them and they can improve from that. So they seem to somehow take that critique very well, learn from it. Yes and no?
Um, yeah, I mean, so I'm a parent as well. So in my own experience, I don't know how well my kids take critique. But I get what you're saying,
Age
right?
group
So
matters.
I think if it's formatted or
Hmm.
scoped or
Hmm.
done in such a way that
Hmm.
it's not critique,
Hmm.
it's positive constructive criticism. Okay, it's critique, I guess, from that perspective, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely.
It's how you present it to the child.
Absolutely. So, and I guess it's also the age group that child's
And
in.
I think so.
So that
Yeah, yeah,
matters too.
very much so.
So,
Developmental.
your preteens, pubertal age, you're very sensitive to critique.
Yeah,
Early on, maybe not so much. And also the way you present your
that's right.
critique.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you demean or belittle someone, that would affect them negatively.
that's right.
I think that's also true for adults.
Yeah, if you laugh at someone and say "ye kya kiya" and you start
Yeah.
laughing, I mean that happens all the time. "Ye kya bana, ye kya kiya, ye kya."
Yeah.
So then obviously that's not constructive criticism.
Hmm.
It's just critiquing for without any improvement
That is true.
built into.
That is true. So, another thing that I noticed was, and we'll keep on referring to, because so our topic for today is being childlike. So you'll get to hear a lot of, like, being childlike. Children are us referring to kids. So another thing that really inspires me is that, they can let go of arrogance. It's
Hmm.
not that
Hmm.
hard.
Hmm.
So letting go of arrogance and not wearing the expert's hat, which
Hmm.
again ties into our previous discussion on perfection, being a perfectionist.
Hmm.
So they don't necessarily or always wear an expert's hat. It's
Hmm.
the adults who somehow is forced to wear an expert's hat,
Hmm.
or we think
Hmm.
that we deserve to.
Hmm.
So being opinionated
Hmm.
or being, wearing that expert's hat,
Hmm.
how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so the way I've looked at being an expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, some of the processes that we teach in innovation to our students or professionals for that matter is that when you go into a space, go without any arrogance, without judgment
Mm-hmm.
attached to anything, because then and in fact, you want to take off your expert's hat.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go in with an expert's hat, then you've already put judgment in there.
Absolutely,
Because
you're
you say, I
opinionated.
know, you don't know,
Yeah.
do it this way. But that's not what innovation ecosystem building is about, and
Mm.
especially design thinking
Mm.
strategies that we've been teaching
Teaching.
as well and
Mm.
actually doing in the clinical space or non-education space,
Mm.
is that you go in without that expert's hat.
And that is so important. So many times when we've done these design thinking drills, we've learned from our
Client.
participants,
Oh, yeah.
clients,
Yeah.
participants. You get to learn about a
Of course.
process.
Yeah.
So I think that approach is so important. And I think we as a team have picked this up from children. That
We
you
have.
shouldn't, that's
Yeah.
the first thing we tell them, that, we're not experts here.
Mhm.
We probably don't know anything about this technical space that we're in, if someone's our client, but and you get to learn, and I think that's okay. So
Yeah.
constant teaching and learning.
Mhm.
You are also learning from your client, that openness.
Mhm.
I think that's something that we need to be constantly
Yeah.
reminded of, because it's so easy
Mm.
as an adult if you're good at a certain process, to start assuming
That's
that
true.
you're an expert there.
You're right. What that reminds me also, Marine, is that uh, children tend to be much more inclusive. So inclusion and diversity, अगर किसी को सीखना है तो बच्चों
Yeah.
को देख लें आप,
Yeah.
right? Because बच्चों को, and I'm talking about young kids because I've worked a lot with young kids. Young kids, right? What age group I would say, let's say preschoolers, right? So, or even early schooling, early school. So maybe between, let's say 5-6 years to 10-12 years. And those kids will play with other
Anyone.
children, no matter what background, what ethnicity, what religion, doesn't matter to them. It's again, I think it's society that indoctrinates that no, this is the right group to
Right.
play with, that is not the right group to play.
Right.
So वो किधर से आता है? वो तो
हाँ.
society indoctrinate ही करती है ना.
That is true. A
Kids
child.
will play,
हाँ,
kids
हाँ.
will go ahead and play, and kids will create, and kids will be fine.
Hmm.
And arrogance नहीं है, right?
Yep.
So I think बहुत कुछ सीख सकते हैं बच्चों से if you want to. Just observe them in their most natural state, which is while they're playing. That's what I think. When they're playing, it's one of the most natural states to learn from kids.
Fair
You don't have
play.
to even
Fair play.
fair, yeah, exactly, fair play. You
So
know,
fair play in its truest
in its
essence.
truest sense. I mean, and then I think some kids can be mean. Okay, let's not take that 100%. But for the most part,
हाँ.
I don't think उनके अंदर वो होता है कि they're going to start hitting, beating. Most kids will not.
हाँ.
I mean, there'll always be that one-off bully.
हाँ, that's
Bullying भी
fine.
होती है.
हाँ.
ऐसा तो नहीं है कि bullying बच्चे bully नहीं करते हैं. But वो भी सीखते हैं ना. I think
Exactly.
वो
That's
भी
learned
देखते
behavior
हैं, learned
too.
behavior भी बहुत होता है. Right? So what are they what are they picking up from what the parents are watching, or what the parents are doing at home, or what the older siblings and so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely. So you know how they say children are like sponges?
Oh yeah.
And their senses are so sharp, they will pick up things.
Yeah.
पता नहीं, कहीं से सुना, कहीं से कुछ देखा, and they will absorb.
Yeah.
So that also ties back into, yes, learned behavior. But otherwise, love the point of inclusion and diversity. 21st century skills, all big organizations, every organization is so big on, being inclusive and diverse. But I feel as adults, that becomes conditional. But when
kids are unconditional.
Yes.
That's a good point. It's a great point. They will be, I think so. I think they'll be pretty unconditional about it as well. And parity. That's the other thing. They have a very sense, fair play. So they do have that sense of fairness about it.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we have a comment here. I'm
Sure.
gonna pause. And okay, there is a question. So this person here, Abdullah Jamil. Oh, sorry. He says, "Hello, Dr. Asad. I'm curious. How can one maintain their childishness? Is it not a natural phenomena that with time it goes away?" And we will get into that
Yeah,
too.
I think that is one of the things we wanted to talk about. But let's get into that question because we'd love for people to be interactive here as well. There's several people here. Thank you so much for being here. And people online. So Abdullah, I'm assuming, is online. So great question, Abdullah. So the question is, how do you maintain that sense of childlessness, not childlessness, childishness, not childlessness, childishness, right? So yeah, I think what tends to happen, and this happened with me, so I can give you my own experience or journey, that although I was trained as a pediatrician, that sense of being, putting myself in the child's shoes, and that's empathy, looking at things through the child's eyes or through the child's lens, and just being childlike, it was not something that I was aware of. But I was always doing something or another, and I would be, it would be highlighted more so at home. You're too childlike. Why are you such a child? So
were you whiny?
Well, yeah, I don't think I was whiny, but maybe I was. So, but it was almost like, why are you such a child? And why do you have to be so childlike? And why are you why don't you take things seriously? And why do you laugh off things and all of that? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe that was part of that thing that, kids are pretty carefree in certain ways, and humor that kind of ties this point into humor as well.
Mhm.
I think agar humor seekhna to bachon se, because you tell a kid a joke,
Yeah.
and if the joke is really funny, and you can get and the kid will laugh unconditionally. Kid will find the joke funny and will laugh, and won't be a pretend laugh. I think, and so there's just one example, but so that childlike nature, if once I started realizing that there is that aspect of one's inner child, and what was happening in the past was when I was being asked why am I such a child, I actually started being more of a child. So agar koi mere se bhi ye bolta hai ki you're such a child, I'm like, yeah, bring it on.
Own
Okay,
it.
own it. So own it and own it proudly. Because for several things that we've already discussed, right? So going back to that question, I think there's a way of actually actively maintaining and building that childlike state within you as well. And the Tao and the Tao Te Ching and other um, texts also do talk about. And I'm not talking about child development texts, or biomedical texts from that perspective. I'm talking about philosophy. And if you delve into either Eastern or Western philosophy, there are things that are being described about children. How can you learn from children, and how can you maintain your own childlike state?
Right. And we will get into that, but I would like to bring you back to a point you just made. So do you realize how when you said people were comparing you to a child, it was all the negative
No,
things?
it was through a negative lens.
No one, so when you were being creative, no one gave you credit for being childlike
Yeah.
and being creative. It was, oh, you're being whiny,
Whiny,
or oh, you're being,
Yeah, complaining.
exactly.
Why-
So maybe that factor also pushes the adult into becoming an adult or adulting and letting go of their childishness, if
that's
that's
right.
a thing.
Could be.
Because none of your, you being innovative, everything that we've discussed so far, none of it was attributed when you were demonstrating all of that to you being a child or being childlike, but it was all the other things.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's probably just the negative attributes of being whiny or complaining, or being a malcontent or discontent, or so something along those lines, versus the creative aspect or imagination,
or humor that you
humor
mentioned.
as
So
well.
children have this fascinating ability. Their humor is very raw. It's unfiltered.
Yeah, completely unfiltered. So I love about it, right? But the other point, and it's great because I think this question, Abdullah's question, is it is really important, because if you like relating it back to that Tao and the childlike state, or Pu, it's called PU, and the uncarved block and so on and so forth, right? So I think things were happening to me as well, and so when I think about some of the content that I've written, I'm not talking about biomedical writing. I'm talking about children's stories. So I've delved into writing for children, and those stories that were drafted along with other children. Actually, I worked with children for other children, right? So it was really great because I was learning from the child writer. I was just a supervisor, kind of, I would give them a few ideas, but then they would go about writing it out, given that the reader is going to be another child in a different setting, in a different resource. This was work that I was doing while I was in the US. I was in Houston, and we were working on child literacy for kids in Pakistan. But this was high school students and the kids, right? Those are also kids, American kids working for Pakistani kids. So it was a very interesting project from that perspective, collaboration, that here's something by the child for the child.
And you kept user experience in mind.
UX, I didn't know about user experience, UX, and user interface, UI, UX at that stage, but I think that's what was happening. It was happening without really knowing the scientific background to it, the lingo, without the lingo and without the jargon, exactly. So, yes, please go ahead. I'm a child.
You receive
Ah.
more from your patient, so you get more, like as compared to your previous stage of life, and you are not pediatric specialist. The child behavior path. Yeah, as compared to me, I'm a pediatric occupational therapist because there's a pediatric occupational therapist.
So chicken versus the egg, right? What comes first? Eamon, I'm always stumped by Eamon's questions, and they're so insightful. I'm like, oh my God, she gets me to think. For the online folks, if they didn't hear, so the question was, Eamon's question was, because I'm a pediatric emergency doc, pediatrician by training, and working in pediatric emergency department, and Eamon is a pediatric occupational therapist. So this connection to children and becoming more and more childlike, is that happening because of our discipline that we have been trained in, and hence that's happening, or is it something from before? I think, I mean, personally, I think even that we have it in us from before. It just becomes highlighted as we get experiential learning, and these things just become more and more clearer to us, and we start understanding ourselves better.
I guess.
I think that's what happens. It's not कि नहीं होता है, पहले होता है, और सब में inner child तो होता है. Everyone has an inner child. It depends on how much you're willing to let that inner child
Nurture,
play.
yeah,
And
nurture.
you have to nurture the inner child.
And I guess it gets channelized better. So working in that environment, you know how we always talk about, for you to be creative, you need that environment. So I guess that specific environment also tends to nurture or channelize,
True. Yeah.
you know, your interests or your thoughts or your inner child. Then,
I think there's a
yes,
question there.
there-
Yeah, go ahead.
we also have another question.
Are you going to test me on that? Line 5, word.
I want to ask that, do you advocate for like bringing the childlike mindset into adults, or like listening to the childlike and listening to children?
Both? Yes, is the question. Great question. Ahmad, right? Ahmad Zafar. So great question. So the question is that based on the article, where it says that, think about or consider incorporating childlike attitudes or processes into your workspace, wherever that is. It could be an organization, could be a private, public organization, government organization, an NGO, a school, obviously, could be a university. So wherever you are, why not incorporate? And so the question then becomes, okay, am I stating or am I saying that the adult should become more childlike, or listen to the child and then get ideas from the child or children? I think both could be considered. I think and more, obviously, ideas can come up and strategies can come up. So the earlier question was about your own childishness, right? And being childlike, or your inner child, and that's about being maintaining or nurturing your own inner child, and that could help you in your quote unquote very stuffy, serious kind of workspace. Could be bureaucratic as hell, but why can't you introduce creativity, which is the child's domain, but then it could be your inner child? I've written for kids, I've doodled, so on and so forth, right? So that's my inner child that I'm trying to maintain in such a way. And there are other things I do, best not talked about here. The other thing was listening to children, and that is an exceedingly great initiative point, and very well taken, because when you delve into innovation and entrepreneurship literature, if you're going to have a startup or a product that's meant for the child, you've got to get information about it from the child. So your prototyping that you're doing, your client is going to be should be the child, and you get information from the child. And even before you actually have a prototype, a physical prototype, you should have those kids as part of your maybe focus group discussion, or whatever it is that you're trying to build up for kids. And that's a great way of strengthening your business potential as well.
And
I hope that answers your question.
And we've also done that. So
We've
the
done that, yes.
hackathon, that was the Peds Hack.
Peds Hack, exactly. Hack Peds was the children's tower hackathon, and we invited a bunch of kids alongside the main hackathon. The Hackidathon had about 24 children of varying ages, all the way from 5-6 years to 18, 19 years, 20 as well. And so they came up with their own ideas as to how a children's hospital could be envisioned for the future. And If you give us a budget for it, yeah, sure. We're always looking for budgets.
I was gonna say if you would be our client, but sure, budget
Become a
is.
client. No, we would love to actually talk about the president's challenge, which is about environmental sustainability. And I
That's
think
coming up.
incorporating children
Hmm.
as part of your startup mentality, it could be, somebody could come up with an idea, okay, how can you make kids think about environment and sustaining the environment? So you could have a process where you actually, so we are in the, where we will be implementing that hackathon for the environment and sustainability theme. And so consider that. I'm kind of like advertising for that as well.
Fine. All right. So there's another question from Abdullah bin Faisal. Right. So he says there is this phenomenon called child parenting, whereby you are expected to take care of and be responsible for younger siblings and sometimes maybe an ill family member or parent. How do you think it impacts your childlike personality attributes at a young age?
Oh, wow.
When you're forced to
I
grow
know.
up.
Yeah, that's like fast forwarding your childhood and you just have to adult, right?
Hmm.
Essentially. And
Hmm.
there are scenarios, obviously, hum sabke families mein, I'm sure there are people who have their own, family members ke andar ke some child had to take care of a sick parent or an absent parent for that
Mhm.
matter, or a sibling.
Mhm.
So the question is, how does that impact childhood itself?
Mhm.
Um, from a child development perspective, I think you just have to fast forward. It just ends up fast forwarding your childish state because you're just going to grow up. Um, I don't know what the literature suggests for that. So I don't know from the background, like I haven't read about people who might have probably have done social science kind of research on this as well, or medical research on this. I would think that if somebody had to go through that as a child and is now an adult and they retrospectively think about, okay, I've had to do something similar as well. I remember as a child, as a teenager. So in certain ways, I think it kind of made me less of a child while I was a child, because I was considered so serious. Okay, why are you always serious, right? And so in retrospect, I think that was happening. But over time, I think we just kind of like figure out. Sorry, you have a.
Yeah. So again, continuation of exactly what you're saying. Do you think there's like a specified period in your childhood where you're expected to, follow your creativity, ideas, and everything that you get? And in case you're a child parent or something like this, you pass that particular time period and you grow up in terms of numbers, age. Do you think you can still experience all of that with that at a later time in your life? Or
Why not?
Yeah,
Yes.
why not? Would you like to expand?
Actually, I would like to say that actually I lost my parents at the age of 16.
No. Sorry to hear that.
So, up at Sawal, so more or less, I can relate to it because all of a sudden I was the most senior member of my family.
Hmm.
But the good thing, what I can say that I experienced it, I became more responsible.
Hmm.
I knew at that time that I have to provide for my family. I have to my studies and I have to get married myself. Like I did everything myself. So like especially there are endless possibilities that they can do anything.
Hmm.
I became that child at my age. I'm 34. But maybe I think that that behavior comes with a certain responsibility, with certain experiences. But I think you get there. So now, I do think it will impact something in negative.
Hmm.
Don't see the problem is as humans we always think especially now हमारा एक negative approach था. We don't think it like positive कि कोई बात नहीं हो जाता है. सबके साथ होता है. मतलब कि आप देखें okay, let me just tell you. My name is Dr. Yushra Farudi. I'm a disease surveillance officer in
Okay.
WHO. So I'm currently actively working with flood victims.
Hmm.
तो उसमें जो जैसे बच्चे आप उनके साथ जाते हो आप उनकी बातें सुनो आपको रोना आ जाएगा उससे
Hmm.
लेकिन at the same time आपको उनको इंश्योर कराना होता है
Hmm.
so as an adult मुझे लगता है आपकी बहुत रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होती है आपकी क्या लर्निंग है या आपकी क्या एक्सपीरियंसेस वो बताओ
Hmm. Beautiful. Thank you for that.
That is.
Thank you.
That
I
is.
think that addresses it.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything else to offer. Azad, did you? Yeah. Great.
girls growing up in our part of the world,
Hmm.
and very young age, young girls are expected to take care of on decision of how that should learn how to do the time. बच्चियां बड़ी उनको शऊर आ जाता है younger age से compared to boys बहुत सारा you could find it's a very good topic to explore if you're interested. Basically, what I wanted to say is that I like the term childlike.
Hmm.
It's not childish.
Yeah, yeah.
Childish,
Mhm.
childlike.
Good point.
Like, and it's just my childish is, कोई बार negative connotation.
Like me, I'm like, I've been told.
Somebody else's perception.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody might perceive a certain behavior childish,
Ah,
and another person might perceive that same behavior as childlike.
that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm a qualitative
Hmm.
person, right? So we have to say narrative, that's my approach. And so reality is constructed
Hmm.
based on who we are and what lens are we using to look at that reality. Right? So I'm more of a constructivist. So like so childish, childlike, use of the term childlike.
Hmm.
And for me, so it kind of invokes the images of that whole idea of the first time, the innocence,
Hmm.
right? So you're being exposed to new ideas, so there's an element of curiosity, an element of around the learn, around
Yeah.
when you have experiences, all sorts of experiences, so then kind of like yeah,
Yeah.
done that,
Yeah.
for a t-shirt, whatever, right? So
T-shirt.
that is what starts happening over time. I the child like the idea. Maybe just kind of try to remember what are the childlike features that I want to, maintain in my life, right? Because maybe I can't have that, the age of innocence, but what is it that I can continue to have in my life? So, but at the same time, I'm also thinking that is the childlike of privilege.
Hmm.
Can in everybody or can most of us really be childlike?
Hmm.
And it's a question that I'm thinking about. I don't know because here thinking, I have access to experts I do. I've had this conversation. Like-minded people were thinking about that. I could if I walk out, before about being in a certain way, like have that kind of stability.
Hmm.
Behave like this. You need to make money. You need to do this. La la la. Can I really be childlike if I don't have other privileges?
Yeah.
I don't. Great conversation.
That's it. And also that's a great. So two things like uh, just the second the latter point first. Is it a privilege? And I don't know. I don't know, but I think it's a great thing to consider. And thank you for that. Childish versus childlike, because I think that makes a lot of sense. And is it a privilege to be childlike? I think what I have picked up from my reading of the Tao Te Ching or the uncarved block and innovation literature and how childlike behavior attitude is positively linked to innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, is that you're childlike within a certain framework, right? So it's not that you're going to be childlike ad infinitum. It's for that particular project. You know that if you want to be exceedingly creative, then how would a child consider that, right? Unlimited possibilities, imagination, given full reign, so on and so forth. And I agree with you that in life, you can't be childlike all the time because adulting and responsibilities and being an adult is messy as well, right? So that's got its own challenges. So And it's got value as well. Okay, so so yeah, I guess maybe the point is not to say that one state is better than the other. I think it's got its nuances as well, and but yeah, you've kind of really linked it to more interesting points and questions, and and that's what we want through the series as well. We're not experts in child development, right? And then that's the point. We shouldn't be
We don't want
telling
to be.
you that we're experts
Yep.
in anything, actually.
So
So
I guess what the point here and what I'm hearing is, it's not an either or situation. We'd really like it to be an and situation. Why must you be, why do you have to be responsible but cannot be creative like a child? You can be, and you beautifully demonstrated that by sharing your life story with us. So it's an and situation and not either or. Like, you don't have to be, if you're responsible doesn't mean you can't be creative. You can be but here's the thing with creativity, you can't be creative all the time. So creativity also happens in bursts, it's in waves. And for those waves, maybe for that specific time, you can still be responsible, but
be
also
childlike
be childlike.
and be
Yes,
childish
and
as
be,
well.
yes.
The other point that you had made, sorry, so because you mentioned a T-shirt. Did you mention a
Yes, she
T-shirt?
did.
Yeah, because like I don't know
Because
if you
we
need
have
like
one
you've
right
got
here.
T-shirts, right? So you got like show and tell here.
So when you
So-
mentioned t-shirt, I was like, okay,
like
that's our
here,
cue.
we should segue into our Batman over here. For those, it is worst dad ever. So
That's the camera.
there we go. I don't know if people can see worst dad ever. And this was something that was gifted to me by my kids and my nephews. Actually, it was my nephews really, but it's like okay, fine, chalo. I wear this with pride, and
And there's
another
another
T-shirt
one.
because I know that there's something. Yeah, remember when I asked for your opinion? No, me neither. Okay, so this is for the people online, so you can see this. And Joe Hussain is sitting right over here. Hussain is our design and comms person. So Hussain is doing a great job with the flyers. So if you notice that the three sessions in the I series all has this photograph of me wearing this T-shirt. So there's a point that's being made over here. And humor is actually um, a, a great way of teaching as well. And kids are a natural at connecting to humor or using humor as well. And Marine pointed that out earlier as well. So
Oh, sorry.
thank you for that segue. And there was a question.
Yeah, and we do
And
have
then
a
we can
couple,
just
and
move
we
on.
have a couple
Oh,
of
and yeah,
questions
okay,
online.
let's get
It's
to-
buzzing.
That when children are labeled as being adults, like
Yeah, too serious. Yeah.
The reverse.
Mm,
and what ends up happening is what you said, you create as opposites and it becomes either or, and they become usually
Mm.
they don't coexist. So my question was like, if you were to bring about a coexistence,
mm.
each maybe like not politics, you have unlearn on either side, kind of have them merge. Because a lot of like trying to retain a childlike state would have, for example, me or anyone else who kind of unlearn a lot of
Oh yeah.
reaction.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, don't do this, ये करना, वो नहीं करना, so before we can even learn, there's a lot of unlearning.
Yeah.
that might
Aisha, I think you've already initiated the process. You're demonstrating through your comment, which is actually a comment question, is that awareness or recognition, I think is the start, right? And you probably will be doing this perhaps more knowingly, and you build design into it as well. So it's not no longer going to be a default. At least that's what I believe, that it stops being a default and you're actually designing that stage or state. Okay, I've got to be childlike, thinking about this project or this thing or whatever, that this interaction. And if I feel like being childish or childlike, I'm going to be childish and childlike, come what may. So उस तरह से फिर वो एक design का aspect आ जाता है. So and it's a great question, you know, how much of child versus adult, and it doesn't have it can be a harmonious coexistence, right? And sweet spot kya hai, wo kisne dekha hai, I don't know. Perfection kya hoti hai? So that's again, I think it's our thing about moving towards some perfection kind of a ratio, golden ratio perhaps, or whatever, but it's not like that. I think it's always going to be like a push and a pull, utar chadhao or whatever. Oh yeah. Yeah, of course. ADHD.
And it's like this would initiate that process. So, if you want to be childlike, surround yourself with people that will support you and not diminish that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Kind of life.
Yeah.
My question is related to the types of t-shirt. It's about need your opinion.
This
No,
one?
That's
Worst
the
dad
one.
ever?
No, the other
Oh,
one.
okay, the other one.
The other one.
Do we have to get into it? What's the evidence?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like they never ask your opinion. So, for example, because they have a sense of achievement, like you got sense of achievement or amazing whatever, you put this laptop in front of 3 year-old kid. They never ask you how to open it. They most likely खुद open करेंगे, खुद search
We'll
करेंगे.
figure it out.
Curious है ना? हाँ.
Other than okay, ये touch है क्या? I guess open होगा क्या होगा? So do you think this child have a very amazing sense of achievement? That's why they never want your opinion. They thought कि वो अचीव हो जाएंगे और failure करने कुछ sense नहीं होता. You trigger me passionately.
I'm like, hey, I'm not an expert.
Maybe.
नहीं नहीं अच्छा मैं मजाक कर रहा हूँ.
Of their act.
Hmm.
Action, just spend hours thinking about you, saying हो जाएगा ये कुछ ना करूँ because you're aware. And I think it's just that कि अगर हम look at ourselves childlike, so yeah, I'm aware of the consequences. Yes, I should go ahead and
Yeah.
take the plot, whatever.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
great point.
And that also ties into stoicism.
Hmm.
Like, come what may, like you can't really control the outcome.
Outcomes. It's
right?
a process.
It's the process.
Yeah.
So do you see how like being childlike is also linked to our initial point that we were trying to make?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of synergy,
Right.
Different thoughts, different ideas, different philosophies, and tend to be synergistic.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love my learning objectives. I'm guilty of that.
What
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Discovery. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
You're right.
So forget about being childlike.
Right. Appreciating the process and enjoying the process more than outcomes. Sure, not really saying based in an academic institution we forget about the outcomes completely, but why not start enjoying the process?
Like you know what I mean? I think you have to kind of start reading.
Yeah.
It really sounds like a design thinking activity right
Yeah.
here.
No, that's a great. I think just bouncing off of that. So Ken, I forget. There's a brilliant TEDx.
So Ken Robinson.
Sir Ken Robinson, yes, and I'm blanking on the type.
School
Yeah,
scale
do
creativity.
skills, do school scale creativity.
Yes.
and it delves into what the points that you're making, and several of these points, I would highly recommend that people, look up that TEDx. It's 12 minutes, 15 minutes. It's brilliant. So Ken Robinson. And I think, yes, schools certainly kill creativity. Yeah, we could get into, we could go off on a tangent about education and, how do we incorporate creativity into education and so on and so forth. But thanks for the
That's great.
points.
So if Hussein could pull up the slides, we do have some
No,
slides.
okay, sure.
We really like discussing.
Are there some more questions?
Yes, there are comments here and questions. Okay, so
we can do whatever you want.
Both.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
So Khalid Hamid says nurturing childlike attitude during our daily lives is a great way to cultivate creativity. There's a comment. And then Sayyid Asad Bukhari says, I think children are good at creating games and we grow to lose this. And when we grow, we lose this capacity to make and play games. That's why gamification is something that is being explored. What do you say about it? And I think CCIT.
Right. Gamification, like team collaborative. In fact, I mean, we tend to like encourage team-based gamification or activities versus cutthroat competitive gamification, if I may. I don't know whether it works or not for us, but yes, agreed. I mean, I don't know if that was a question or a comment. But.
And then Khalid Hamid says, I wonder what would be childlike way to de-stress as adults after a long day of work and what Taoism might say on this.
Yeah, so I could tell you what I do or what I've tried in the past. I've doodled. That's something. I mean, I don't sketch normally, but doodling has been a great way of like de-stressing for me. And I doodle on anything and everything, right? So like napkin sketches bhi kiye hue hain, or board pe bhi kiya hua hai, or laptop ke upar bhi kiya hua hai, or phone pe bhi kiya hua hai. So I mean, that's me. That's just my way of de-stressing. Yeah, those kinds of things one could try, and that to me, that's how I'm defining being childlike, just doodling. There could be other things here one wants to do. I think it could be linked to whatever creative pursuit you have, and you could be doing that.
Makes sense. All right, thank you, Sam.
Creative movement be opens, be childlike in certain ways. Some of us do move creatively. Yeah. So slides.
Yes. So I think this one was when we discussed the Tao Fu.
Yeah, this is the quotation from the book, The Tao of Fu, and it's a lovely book. And yeah, I can't read now. It was on the.
Can you read that?
I'll have to wear empowered. Yes, now I can read really well. When you discard arrogance, complexity, and a few other things that get in the way, sooner or later you will discover that simple, childlike, and mysterious secret known to those of the uncarved block. Life is fun, and that's such an important point. And I forgot to mention, life is fun. I mean, it's up to you to accept that, right? So it can be fun. Keep it simple. Keep it childlike, and it can be fun. And it is fun. And uncarved block suggests that things in their uncarved state are powerful in their own simplicity, and that's what you mentioned earlier. Yeah. Ah. Yeah. Yeah.
You feel all the more and excited, like for a kid that's 5 being like 20, like as you keep solving that block, that the infinite possibilities start narrowing down, and you kind of limit yourself. You can always start over. So it reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Where you think anything is possible and make it confident.
Yeah, and that's, you mentioned earlier that unlearning, right? So, and I think that also points to the same thing, that it's not a static process. You do go through these cycles of learning and unlearning, and the childlike state might not be there all the time anyways, right? So, but when it's there, cherish it, nurture it. Okay.
What's the next slide?
This is the next slide. Oh, that's the next slide. Yes, so this is just again re-emphasizing some of the points we made earlier, being childlike and linking it to ICE are developing empathy for consumers very different from yourself. And the consumers in this case are children or teenagers, adolescents, young adults, right? Best companies recognize value of talking and listening to kids, putting their products into the hands of teenagers and getting their feedback. And then best products embrace people's differences and kids in this case. This is also from the book, The Art of Innovation. Be more open to asking the child like why and why not that lead to innovation. Next slide is, oh yeah, that's one of my doodles. Well, yeah, so Baba, Nuri, and Ted. So Nuri is my daughter, and Ted was one of the first stories that I wrote in my book of short stories, and that was Teddy. Teddy Graham was Nuri's teddy bear from school. Every child got to keep the teddy bear at home, take the teddy bear home for the weekend, and they were meant to take that teddy bear to different places and then take photographs and then write about the teddy bear and what the teddy bear was feeling and so on and so forth. So I ended up writing a story from Ted's perspective, and that was a lot of fun. So, and I doodled this several years later. Okay, so being childlike, what is it about small children, right? So they simply do not give a shit. Okay, so they just do it. It's like, so they're less critical, judgmental, hierarchical. They're less complex. They're simple. They're more loving. They're more honest, transparent, imaginative, creative. They happily prototype. Although they live in the same world as us, they perceive it differently, and I think that's beautiful that they perceive it differently. Why should they perceive it the same way as adults? And nothing against adults. I think I can be an adult. Oh yes, this is Hackpeeds. It's a lot of fun. This was back in 2017, a major hackathon of 2017, and the flyer with the doodles was created by a medical student. She was a fourth year or a final year medical student, Labena Essen, who's a pediatrician in training in the US now. And she loved doodling. And if any of the med students here, students over here, delve into Labena's history, I think she's she created these doodles and huge actually abstracts, which were also printed and put in the anatomy lab or the ASL something lab over here. And the students lounge. Yeah. So Labena was into doodling, and I said, okay, create our flyer then. And yes, and this was another flyer that she created specifically for the children. Let's innovate for the child, inviting children to redefine the future of health. Yep. This is something that I showed, and I think we showed this in the last ice coffee session, which was on being water-like. And so what this is meant to show is the inner realm, and this is what I call my life ring, and my inner realm is a few things that I consider are powering my outer realm. Okay, and what you're seeing, the four things surrounding my inner realm is my outer realm, quote unquote. Inner realm ke andar being childlike is depicted by Mr. Teddy Graham, who's the teddy bear over there, Ted, and some other things over there. They're powering me. So, anyways, being childlike is really important to me, and it took a lifetime of mine to actually acknowledge that that is something that needs to be nurtured, and it's hopefully remaining till I die. Okay. Anything else? Oh, there's Belungra. Belungra was the kids' books that I worked on, and 5 kids' books that we worked on while I was in Houston, and Book Group, an organization based in Karachi, were the publisher and the editors for the Belungra series. These are bilingual books. If you're interested, look them up. They're meant for the kids who are between the ages of 6 to 12, I would say. A lot of fun, this project. And that's it from the slideshow perspective and the show and tell perspective.
Okay, so we do have another question. Do we have time for another question?
It's
Well,
5:01,
five.
but we could take one more
Last
perhaps
question,
and
maybe? Yeah,
then wrap up.
right. So Eras, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct. So what are some actionable steps adults can take to reconnect to their creative instinct?
So yeah, so great question. And I think we've kind of gone over some of these things through this session already, and some of the other guests over here have also mentioned things, right? So I think, and the point I was making earlier, if you, I think you've got to acknowledge that, and if the question is linked to your inner child, then acknowledging the presence of that child, first of all, I think that's step one or step zero. You know, है बच्चा, ओके, दिल तो बच्चा है, थोड़ा कच्चा है, लेकिन है तो सही, राइट? सो बच्चा है। तो आप उसको एक्नॉलेज कर लें पहले तो, ठीक है तो फिर आप कुछ कर सकते हैं ना, अवेयरनेस आएगी तो फिर ही कुछ कर सकते हैं चीजों के बारे में। सो आई थिंक दैट्स, सो यू स्टार्ट ऑफ विद एक्नॉलेजिंग दैट देयर इज एन इनर चाइल्ड दैट इज देयर, एंड देन फिगर आउट what is the inner child. I think, I mean, you could, for me, it worked out the way that what is my inner child responding to? What is my inner child perceiving? What are things that make my inner child happy, right? Or in other words, what's making me happy? Because my inner child is no different from me. I think that's happening over time. That's happened over time, that more and more the inner child is me. Actually, it's no different from, it's not a different entity that's within, but it is me. And so things of this nature that we've spoken about, creativity, right? What is that creative pursuit of yours? Is it writing? Is it doodling? Is it photography? Is it music? Is it dance? Is it sculpture? Whatever. Creative pursuit could be outside of those things as well. It could be work related, and looking at it through the creative lens could be maintaining that inner child as well. And then what else? And you mentioned earlier, right? Process,
Right.
focusing on the process versus the outcome. Giving, not being focused on perfection is another thing. And, just being prolific in your creativity. If it's doodling, keep doodling, why do you need somebody to tell you whether you're good at it or not? And what does it even mean to be good at something, right? It's a gauge that you set for yourself, right? So do and if you're doing it iteratively, you probably will improve as well. So yeah, so just be prolific. Don't judge yourself even. Don't judge your own creativity. Yeah, so those kinds of things.
Great. So that actually brings us to the top of the hour. So
Yeah.
one last message, actually not last, but like one message for
one-
today's session.
Yeah.
Would you like to quote from the article?
Yeah. So I think, and I think this also perhaps goes back to Eris's Eris.
Yes.
So Eris's question, and I'll just read it out from this is the ending of the article. It said, in the final analysis, nurturing one's inner child, no matter what age or stage you find yourself in, can be a life-altering process. The sense of wonder that it brings can be your go-to place where you can safely recede and chillax without fear of reprisals. One way of doing this is to let your inner child emerge and be constantly inspired by nature and creativity. Look upon everything, plants, animals, rivers, mountains, seas, human interactions, works of art and science, and so on, with a simple sense of bewilderment, awe, and curiosity, as if a newborn is looking upon life and love for the very first time. It will and can do wonders. Trust me on that. So I would say that's my, leave this as a take home.
Great.
Try it out. There's, there's no failure. There's no failure in
that.
this. That
is true.
Yeah, and choose happiness,
And
right?
yeah.
So yeah. So
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you
No,
for
thank you.
such a great session. And thank you, everyone.
And Batman over here.
And Batman with the awesome shirt.
World's greatest dad.
Yes. So we'll see you folks next time with another topic. Thank you for
Thank
tuning
you.
in. Have a great evening, everyone.